5 minutes of a question, which would be considered a administrative judicial, oh darn it, I had the right word for it just a moment ago. A review, a judicial.
It's related to
review based on a rule of the court, and it does directly involve this case in paperwork that I find requirement to file. And it is a fundamental principle that is presenting a legal impossibility to me.
Ask your question.
Okay.
And hang on one second. Mr. Archibald, before we go any further, let me just make sure, can you hear the court and can you hear Mr. Fredrickson?
I can, yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Basically, how I bumped into this was the fact that I was a C&D student. That means I paid attention only to the fundamentals and the principles of what I was learning, rather than the details. I never learned 18 U.S.C. 241, 242, and 245. I only knew Ku Klux Klan Act, for example. The last 20 years, I have had to study law in order to protect myself. I have been attacked more than twice with false allegations during the time that I've been on sex offender list. And this has required me, in order to have some basic understanding of the principles of law, more so than the discipline or the nomenclature of the specific laws I've been referring to. The problem I have encountered is 100 years ago, we may have only had 1 or 2 sheriffs in this territory. If 2 ranchers had a dispute—
Let me we only have limited time.
I understand, but this is the fastest explanation.
Ask your question.
My
Don't
question
explain.
is,
That's
can
the
I be
question.
obstructed from filing a proper complaint under Court Rule 4 to the clerk's office? The explanation and the reasoning is this: I have a right in order to file a grievance. They do not have the ability in order to change the title or demand that I file it under a civil when it is not a civil.
Well, let me pause you. What do you want today?
I would like to close in the fashion of the court the TRO. My intentions are simple. I don't think that he can present the court for any reason to have contact with me. He doesn't like me. I don't like him. I think that that may be a rather speedy issue. The issue that I have found, though, is
I'm
that—
going to pause you again. I'm just going to ask you very direct questions. Are you asking me to issue a permanent protection order
Yes,
protecting
Your
you from Mr. Archibald?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
And I
Let's
don't
stop
know whether
there.
or not to include the red line laws concerning his guns and to have them taken away temporarily. I'll leave that at the discretion of the court.
Are we going to allow all of this, Your Honor? Like,
Well—
I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be rude, but this seems to be going to some weird far off land of other things other than whether or not I threaten.
Well, I'm trying to figure that out. So we're going to address the permanent protection order request right now. That's what we're scheduled for. That's
Yes,
the only
sir.
motion I have in front of me. If you would like to file any other type of cases against Mr. Archibald, you can certainly do that.
I understand, but the actual first fault begins with this case. So
Let's
I
just
have to
address
stick with
this
the first
case.
fault. That's L1. So.
Okay. So last time I granted you a continuance because you needed more time to prepare.
Yes, sir.
Are you now prepared to
I am
to hear?
prepared in order to proceed.
Okay.
I have already admitted to evidence, I believe, 4 videos.
Hang on.
contain— Yes, sir.
We'll talk about that in a moment. So let me go back over the requirements so you're both clear on what needs to happen here today.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Archibald, first of all, let me check in with you. Are you ready to proceed to your hearing today?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Now, Mr. Fredrickson, you will need to prove to me by a preponderance of the evidence that acts occurred justifying the issuance of the temporary protection order. And what I mean by that is you have to prove to me that at some point in the past, Mr. Archibald placed you in imminent danger to life or health. That's element 1. Element 2, you have to prove that those acts are likely to continue in the future or that Mr. Archibald would intimidate or retaliate against you.
Okay,
Now—
so the first element that I have to show is that I was in imminent danger.
At some point in the past, you do not have to show you
Then
currently.
the second element, sir,
That he will continue to engage in the behavior.
will. Now, can I also use the word intend to?
If you can, sure.
Okay, will or intend to continue.
Or that he would intimidate or retaliate against you.
I believe I have the ability in order to show all three prongs, Your Honor. I can do that in a 2-minute excerpt. Now, there is over 2 hours of video that is submitted to the court.
So based on the agreement you two reached last time, I reviewed that video, the video that I have, the video you
sir?
submitted with your temporary protection order.
I would like to also admit to the court that the evidence that is contained online has been tampered with. In the videos that I had given you,
Only reviewed
I
what you
understand what
provided.
I'm saying is that the record has been tampered with. In the videos
He's
that I
talking
gave
about
you-
stuff that's non-relevant, and he can't prove that anything has been tampered with, and I don't think that we should continue to hear this out. And again, I'm not trying to be
Actually, I can prove it
disrespectful,
to the
Your Honor.
court in real time, Your Honor.
You're saying the evidence you submitted to me has been tampered with?
Has since been tampered with because
What do you mean by
I've
since?
been able to capture. What he did was he tried to make it so I could not capture the text by removing his text in a YouTube broadcast. And you can go in.
How's
to
that
insert-
relevant to me?
I'm sorry?
How's that relevant to me?
Well, the problem is I was lucky enough in order to have recorded that text and it was immediately later changed. And
But why is that relevant? If
the reason why it is relevant is it shows that he is following me, has chased me down to the grocery store, and is seeking me out in the grocery store,
Right.
which is contained
That's
in the video that shared the text. Since then, those texts have been altered, and I can show you that. I tried to recapture that, and they had been altered.
But I can only consider the evidence that has already been submitted in the case.
I understand.
So this alteration
No,
seems
I'm just
irrelevant.
bringing it to it may be relevant or irrelevant because I was able to capture that element.
All right,
which
Mr.
was
Fredrickson,
My
stop.
request.
Just let me get through the advisements. Let me talk
I'm
to
sorry.
both
Oh,
you
I
and
didn't
Mr.
know.
Archibald,
Okay, go
and
ahead.
then I will swear you in, and then you can present your evidence. Let me just get through the threshold, past the threshold matters. All right, so do you understand the elements that you need to prove?
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Archibald, did you hear my reading of the elements? Do you have any questions about that?
I do not have any questions, sir.
All right. The burden rests with Mr. Fredrickson. So, Mr. Fredrickson, you will go first. The burden is by a preponderance of the evidence, which means more likely true than not. If you make a statement and Mr. Archibald makes a statement and they are conflicting and I can't break the tie, ties go to the defendant. Do you have any questions about your burden of proof?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Archibald, do you have any questions about the burden of proof?
I do not, sir.
All right. The other procedural matter that I want to discuss with both of you at the onset is that I will not allow direct cross-examination of parties in a protection order. So what that means for you, Mr. Archibald, if you have questions that you would like to ask Mr. Fredrickson, keep a list of those. At the end of the testimony, I'll have you read me those lists. If I find the questions to be evidentiarily appropriate, meaning there's no legal objection to them, then I will read those questions to Mr. Fredrickson. Any questions about that procedure?
Yes, sir, I understand, and I've been handling it the correct way this far, right? I asked you questions, not Mr. Fredrickson.
You have, yes, correct.
Okay, awesome.
All right. Now, I already asked the parties last time, or told the parties that they can each ask for a one-time 14-day continuance if they're not prepared to proceed to a hearing. Both parties have indicated they are ready to proceed. I should also mention for the record that by agreement of the parties, the temporary protection order can be extended for up to 1 calendar year instead of the protection order being made permanent. My expectation today is that we go to a hearing on the permanent protection order, but nonetheless, Mr. Archibald, is the temporary extension order something we should discuss, or should we just proceed with the hearing?
I'm not interested in having any order that bars me from anything, Your Honor, and I'm more than happy to talk about it, but I think that we need to hash this out today.
I think you're probably right. Mr. Fredrickson, I would assume you agree with that?
Yes, Your Honor.
So this is an all or nothing hearing, meaning at the end of this hearing, I will decide whether to make the protection order permanent. If I make the protection order permanent, Mr. Archibald, that means it will be in place for at least 2 years, unless Mr. Fredrickson moves to dismiss it. After 2 years, the burden would shift to you to file a motion to show that it's no longer necessary. If you violate that protection order, that could be a Class 2 misdemeanor offense or contempt of court. On the other side, Mr. Frederickson, if I deny your request, that means the temporary protection order vacates today. There would be no more protection order in place, and this case would close today. I think that concludes my reading of the advisement. Mr. Frederickson, are there any issues we need to address or questions I need to answer before I let you begin your testimony?
Not for this segment, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Archibald? Any issues I need to raise or address? Any questions I need to answer before we start with testimony?
No, sir.
Okay, then Mr. Frederickson, I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand. You swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give to this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, thank you. And I already said the videos that were submitted with the very first application for a temporary protection order I have reviewed. There were 2 discs. I will now admit those as exhibits 1 and 2. All right, Mr. Frederickson, please present your case.
Your Honor, there is some history prior to the video recordings, surveillance recordings, I should refer to, that is before the court. The history is this. Approximately 3 years ago, I had learned of a gentleman that had managed to get a Supreme Court directive altered, and that he followed the system going the right way. His name was Eric Brandt. Now, over the last 2-year period, unfortunately, Eric Brandt's enthusiasm exceeded his common sense, and he was found guilty of threatening a judge in Denver. The cause over time was the enthusiasm built up, encouragement by the audience, and unfortunately, a sad story of an otherwise accomplished man. During that time, I had the occasion to meet this gentleman, 303. In the time that, from the time of that time to this event, I spent more time with Mr. 303 during the cause of this event than I have spent in my entire knowledge of him. I didn't follow him. I am not a YouTuber. I am part of WBOU Communications. I have been reinstated onto the FM radio in mainstream as the reporter, as well as the morning DJ from Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. weekdays. Some of the reasons why I'm familiar with the liabilities here is because of my familiarity with interviews that I would do, or paparazzi activities that I used to do over 15 years ago. These were very formal events. There was very strict rules in order to follow. And even though there are only flavor text in my mind, the principles of that is the same. Mr. 303, approximately 2 weeks prior to the 11th, had posted a video, psychological something group or service or something like that, that him and a gentleman that is nicknamed Liberty Bird posted. Now, this was Liberty Bird's words and edited apparently by 303. I'm presuming that only because it showed up on 303's channel, not Liberty Bird's channel, meaning that they were done together. It described all the things that should not be done and should be commended in recognizing those rules. One of the things that they wanted to do was find people that were not in compliance with the sex offender registration. Something a little bit more noble than chasing police officers around. They wanted to, and expressed that they wanted to do community function, which again is a little bit more noble than chasing police around with cameras. To that degree, I didn't know about the video until this event. I didn't have any reason to go to their websites. Since then, during this event, if you were to have heard that, they know the rules. And one of the first things I asked him in first encounter, you know the rules. And I walked away. During the time that he was making some babble, I told him to leave me alone. I was not recording. I didn't see anything to record to walk up. I did not see anything that would promote me to turn on my camera. In essence, I was ambushed. I had a $2,500 camera and I was being challenged to a fight almost immediately. I returned the camera immediately to the van, but I was being followed to my car. When I got to my car, after telling him and having to check him using your verbal judo and the experience I have working in bars, I had to turn around and check him several times to see whether or not he was working up courage or what his current point of view might be. It was very difficult to read and made me nervous. He also was making twitching movements with his middle finger as it was laying by his side, which would indicate toward the barrel of his gun as he was speaking to me. Twice he tapped the bottom of the barrel of the gun that day from Copaco's to the Arby's parking lot as I'm talking to him. I'm trying to get away from him. I get to the Arby's parking lot and he stands direct center. Example, if this is the exit and that is the exit, I would be parked in the center here. And he stood direct center. I had no way of monitoring him or determining whether or not he was getting more or less irritated. So I decided to get my camera away to make sure my dog was okay, because my dog was with me. And I turned on the PA system as an alarm system in order to get the attention of the Arby's restaurant, which I formerly had worked with, and I was an employee at, and I had personal relation with the manager. I seen somebody glance out of the Arby's restaurant to assess what was going on. I was just presuming that they seen a man with a gun challenging me in the parking lot while I sat on the back. This also gave me a time to scan the parking lot to find out where Liberty Bird is, because I know that he's quite commonly working with Liberty Bird, and I didn't see him in the action, so I was presuming he was a backup camera, maybe as much as half a block away from us. I didn't see anybody in those cars that would cause me a problem, so I went ahead and I turned off the music. And I assessed it real quick. He had ran out of excitable juice. He got done fist pumping. He was at a null. This gave me an opportunity in order to, again, excuse myself by driving away. I drove away to the center of a parking lot. The distance is approximately that of a full city block away, being a very large parking lot. I sat there because I was convinced that the police are already on the way, and I am not leaving the scene. I am definitely going to report this. This is scary as heck. Okay, this man followed me all the way with fighting words to my vehicle. I had parked this far away waiting for police already, thinking that the Arby's had called the police. I got in touch with somebody. As I am sitting there, he follows me. Took him almost 2 minutes to reach where I had parked. And he again approaches me. When he approaches me, I am concerned because I'm trapped in my car. I am a sitting target and a stationary target. The closer he got to my car, I got worried. And I got out of the vehicle immediately and approached him in order to create, again, a null between us, a no man's land. This is verbal judo. This is something that I've had to practice at bars as the bouncer or the DJ for the last 30 years. At this time, I'm actually shaking. I'm not exactly sure what to do about it. I open up the door, check the dog again. We've been talking angrily and the dog begins shaking. He's 16, 17 years old, and angry words around him, he will go and hide under the bed or get away from you. And unfortunately, he had no place to get away from. So the dog is reacting at this point. I stall. I'm trying to figure out what to do. I'm also checking the parking lot again to see whether or not there's another car moving closer or whether a police officer has now arrived. I believe, and I can check my notes, but the chronological order is still may be off, but the events are still the same. I believe either I moved the car one more time or the manager had come out and I moved the car. Or I moved the car and then the manager come out. As soon as I had a third party there, I knew that he wasn't working himself up with pure focus on me. He had to split his focus, and the manager was now going to handle the situation. It didn't turn out that way. The manager turned in a false report to the Fort Collins police claiming that I had hit a hole in the building. Now, unbeknownst to me, as this manager is coming out, there is a gentleman by the name of ASAMR, which I am still trying to find his identification, and even his state. Right now, he claims to be in Australia. We have good belief that he is actually in Arizona. The reason being is because I'm a webmaster of one of the outlets for WBOU, which has less than 100 people checking in, most of which I can identify as regular users, one of which I cannot, which coincides with some contacts that we had with ASMR. And right now it's a loose theory. I don't have evidence to show that. However, ASMR was actually engineering this. I also learned, which I do have the evidence on me.
Engineering what?
Engineering as in radio engineering or television engineering. He's actually the director of what's going on. Whether this man walks up closer to the van or whether or not there's a phone call going on. In the first video, he had called WBOU to verify that I indeed worked there, which he did. He actually pressed mute. In the second phone call to the superstore, as he phoned in a false report that this man was at the other end in two-way communication, which I was not a privy of. I did not know this until after the event. Phoned in the false report that was the police response, not Arby's. The police arrive and they credit David Archibald as being the security. He is not. I know the security. I actually, during the course of this event, walked to the front of the property. At the front of the entrance where these security, armed security, has been historically in the last several months posted when you walk in the door. There's always been a security guard there for this is the first time I noticed there wasn't one. However, the manager's passing by telling me I can't be in the front of the store smoking a cigarette while a man is chasing me around the parking lot, armed, locked, and loaded, which is not going to be apparent until we get to the third video. That is the beginning of his video that starts, "Don't walk up on me." Fact is, I did not. My video, which was recorded from the sheriff's department all the way to the store, continuous recording because I was there to report the 11th. It began at 2020, which is literally 5 feet into the county jurisdiction. I've had more success talking to county. They are familiar with me due to the sex offender registration. I have been 100%, if not 110%, I have been warned about filibustering in a desperate attempt to remain compliant. This is the fear I live in on a daily basis. Okay, that someone may put in a false report. On my phone, my GPS is always on. I always have it with me. It's always charged. If I am out in public for the last 2.5 weeks, I have been on the air on YouTube for the most part. Today, I haven't been. For every other trip into town, I have. Each one of these trips has been to the Fort Collins Police Department, which I have in record, that said that they did a thorough investigation without looking at the evidence. They're not going to look at the evidence and their investigation is closed. I thought that looking at the evidence would be inclusive, not exclusive, to doing an investigation. Apparently, I may be wrong about that. However, we also must consider the fact that the police department has a lot more crimes than what they appear to be a performed argument for an audience on YouTube for their entertainment only, which is another point which he says is for his audience entertainment, not for anything that is actually being constructive here. Every single violation that he accused me of, not having a driver's license, is false. Talking to children with the underlying implication that I am attempting to fondle children in the parking lot, giving the general public the idea that I have crammed my head into someone's window, attempting to fondle children in the parking lot, while he escorts me from the time that he caught me through the store, so I would be responsible to the police for having fondled children in the parking lot. This is the third attempt that he makes in order to get me falsely arrested. During the second, in the beginning, in the first 2 minutes, he says, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, I'm going to punk you out and I'm not going to stop. As far as the second prong, I think that would satisfy that well. As far as the first prong is concerned, I would like to bring the court's attention to the ending of this second recording by David Archibald. In the ending, he shows a weapon, holds it up as a drug deal. Look what I get from the police, ha, 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 ha. Laughing, because there's nothing I can do about his intimidation. Laughing, because the only choice I have is a physical confrontation. If I have a physical confrontation in the center of the story, Your Honor, there is no physical confrontation between me and him. It is a contest in who controls the gun. I am military trained. In the third video, I was happy in order to find out, regardless of whether I found out I kinked my back doing it, my muscle memory was strong enough and fast enough that when he released his hand from his gun, which he was holding in the gas station, he had actually taken possession of his gun. That's, in the old days, considered a draw the moment you touch that handle. But since it did not clear the weapon, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let him clear a weapon like that. I already know that it's armed with rest in peace bullets, and I have one shot. If he chose in order to pull that, I have less than a second to react, and I closed that distance. I was happy that I could competently react, and I'm injured. I have 2 places in my back that has been injured. I have a hip that is a trick hip that falls out of place. But my body and my training from 20 years ago took over, and my muscle memory was still there. I was satisfied at that point, if this has escalated any further, that I could physically neutralize a threat to me. But he did take his hand off the gun. I knew that I was on surveillance cameras 360 degrees, not only from his camera, but also from all the gas cameras for the company. The manager immediately trespassed him. He claimed during
Let me
that.
pause you. Now, is this reflected in the 2 videos you provided to me? This is different than the King Cooper's incident.
There should be 4 videos total. I have one where he is approaching me at 2020 North College. The second is my video beginning at the Sheriff's Department, ending, overlapping his second video. The third video should be the incident at the gas station in where I nearly had to disarm him. And the fourth video would be the text from my first video from the Sheriff's Department to the grocery store. At the end of that video, it should include the text.
I think you just provided us with those first 2 videos.
I can provide that, and if there's no objection, because the respondent currently is in possession of exactly what I have. And I can submit that immediately to the court. The only thing that the respondent would not have a copy of is his own actions in the text of the fourth video. Now, included in the
Do you have those videos?
including in this thumb
Hang
drive,
on. You have the thumb drive with
I
those videos?
have 3 thumb drives with me that I'm prepared to surrender. I have a problem, though. There's one piece of evidence that is on that thumb drive that is a witness that is also possibly intertangled in the civil federal case that I have, and it is completely out of character for this witness to have come forward. And unfortunately, the moment that I release this to you, there is a screenshot, which would be of a telephone, which a text chat message is actually occurring with Mr. 303 that reveals that Mr. 303 received nearly $3,500 even prior to having attacked me, having been paid to intimidate and attack me by a subscriber or something. And that is also included in that. The source of the screenshot is extremely credible. but I do not want to release that, as we would want to keep that sealed in civil case that it also applies to.
Okay. Well, I guess my first concern, let me pause your timer for a moment and I'll hear from you, Mr. Archibald. So you're referencing these two videos that you have not yet submitted into evidence. I have not yet had an opportunity to review them. The last two videos I reviewed by agreement of Mr. Archibald.
So have you reviewed a total of 4?
2. Well, how you haven't submitted the other 2? You
Okay.
by your own admission.
No, I understand. Okay.
But now we're running into a little bit of an evidentiary.
Yeah, well, the problem is some of this evidence wasn't even available, and some of the evidence would not be confirmation. I could not show accordance because I have a YouTube strike preventing me from reading the text. Now, if you wish to accept my verbal testimony as that I received text during the course of the end of my video, and I can give you a timestamp when I am receiving it, so you can verify that I am now looking at that. Let me see.
Well, you can certainly testify about this evidence. I don't think at this point we can receive the videos, but you can testify.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so contained within that video is, I am here, I am looking for you, where you are at, and then later in the video, he said he just simply came for groceries, which is grossly inaccurate. In all of the videos, he keeps contradicting himself. It is self-incriminating, and the only thing I can do is detail over 100 timestamps that one or more of these timestamps are creating 3 different scenarios to hide his attempts at filing a false report to me, while threatening me, wearing a sidearm, becoming very menacing, that I cannot get away. And then on top of it, he has also announced since then in videos, in a panel, which is a YouTube broadcast hosted by Stream. And Stream, you can log on there, have other people join, similar to what the court may be familiar with Zoom. After you broadcast or bring these people in, it gives you the option to broadcast to a platform such as YouTube, Twitter, or other providers. During these platforms, he said that he's not stopping, that there's no reason to stop, and that the First Amendment and Second Amendment is good enough. The problem is there's responsibilities that come with the Second Amendment, Your Honor. My behavior has to be at a much higher standard, okay, than a drunk or a loose drunk. That's the reason why we don't allow guns in a bar scenario, okay? There has to be a standard in which these people behave themselves. I am a Second Amendment supporter. Even though I am a felon, I have no bar against IEDs. As a matter of fact, I was trusted by the Army with a plethora of IEDs, including some chemical and nuclear applications. Equipment wouldn't be available, but nonetheless, I'm trained on it. And the only reason why I was trained on it is because I showed the responsibility around that equipment. I am qualified on the radio by the FM radio station because I showed I'm qualified and responsible for that position. In today's society, we have to show this responsibility. And I don't believe that his actions show that responsibility. I believe that this is the irresponsible act that each time he tries to justify that, and the only thing preventing me from acting upon my emotion is his gun. I strongly believe, and I took as fighting words, you're a punk. I'm going to punk you out. Your Honor, if I use these words in this court, it would be less than obvious that I am going to be held in contempt. The contempt of court is based on a mutual respect, a conduct in which that responsibility is taken. I believe that in public, that disrespect can be shown as well. I believe that I will end my argument at this point, but reserve 2 minutes or however the court would like to go.
You have about 8 minutes left. So I'll let you respond to Mr. Archibald's argument. All right, first, Mr. Archibald, before I start your timer and your argument, do you have any questions that you would like me to ask Mr. Frederickson?
Does Rex respond or call his dog Kiddo? Would be the first
Objection,
question.
Your Honor, irrelevant.
Yeah, how's that relevant?
That is actually, so he was talking about his dog and the reason why I was there. And so that second video, while he was driving to King Supers, he actually saw me. He was talking to, I believe, his dog, but I took it differently when I heard it in the video. And so I heard him say, "Hey, kiddo, I don't think this is going to work out today," like 2 or 3 times on his video. And while he was also talking about me, because every single day since the first interaction that I had with him, he's made videos on me. He's made videos talking about taking my gun from me while he sees me. He's made videos talking about he would fight me.
Question.
Yeah, let me pause you, Mr. Archibald.
Yeah.
So I think I understand. So I'm going to ask you the question, do you call your dog Kiddo?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to also rebut the question because it entered many facts before the court. First of all, you
All right.
said that I
You answered the question. You reserved time to argue. Do you have any other questions, Mr. Archibald?
I mean, a couple. I don't necessarily know if they're specifically for him or you, I guess. But I guess I'll go down the list. You can tell me and we'll go from there, I guess.
Okay.
I'd like to know how Eric Brandt is even involved, or if we're going to allow that to be brought up, because this has nothing to do with Eric in the first place. How did I find out about the address at 2020 North College? That's a good question.
How did Miss?
How he's asking me how you found out. Okay.
No,
I'm
asking
in the video.
Hey, Mr. Frederickson, stop.
Yes, sir.
This is why I'm following this procedure. You're not to respond to Mr. Archibald. You're
I understand.
to respond to me.
How did
Mr. Hang on.
Well,
You need to stop.
Okay.
Mr. Archibald, I'm going to ask you to clarify that question.
Thank you.
Do you want to ask Mr. Frederickson how he found out about that address? Clarify the question.
No, I am asked. So he made the assertion that I got put onto him from another human being, which is completely untrue. I would like, because he has viewed all my videos, and so I'm asking Mr. Frederickson what I said was my reasoning for finding out about 2020 North College.
That's
the first address that I was at where he approached me. He actually drove out of his way to come and meet me at 2020 North College. And he came up to me and he spat on me and yelled at me. It's not what he said.
I think, Mr. Archibald, based on the couple questions you've asked so far, I think it might make more sense to have you just give me your testimony so I understand your side of the story. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and let's do that. So, Your Honor, I have been being paid long before I started this thing with Mr. Frederickson. Okay, so I used to film the police. I made myself fairly popular, fairly popular among a group of people that are not as savory as you would want. And then I stopped filming a couple of years ago due to, I was drinking and other things. And so I decided that all this stuff was unhealthy. I was going to focus on myself and my family and get sober. The only reason that all that matters is because now I have changed from wanting to follow the police around to doing other stuff with my life. Mr. Frederickson posted a video about a lawsuit that he filed on somebody else. I don't know who it is and I don't care. It's none of my business. But I saw this video and I know that he is registered in Wellington, Colorado. But the address that he used on that lawsuit is 2020 North College. So my concern as a Fort Collins resident, sir, is that we have a pedophile living somewhere where they're not registered that breaks.
There is no pedophile. He has nothing. Objection to pedophile.
Overruled. So he's testifying to his concern. It's
okay.
It's a subjective
I see
statement.
the application.
It's a subjective statement, but go ahead, Mr. Archibald, you may continue.
Thank you. So my concern is that we have a pedophile living in an unregistered address in an area where there is an abundance of children. So that is how I found out. I found out that Mr. Fredrickson was using that address as a mailing address or an address for him to stay at by his own accord, because he's been speaking about how bad he's going to get these other people that he's suing for talking about him being a pedophile.
Oh,
So
Get a chance to respond.
I'm more than willing, obviously, because I'm here and I showed up, right? I'm not being flippant with the court. I'm more than happy to talk about everything that I've done, to come to court with Rex. And that's something that no one else has been willing to do, right? So I knew that Rex was going to, do whatever he was going to do, but whatever. So moving forward from that incident, the first incident, I did walk back with him 20 something feet behind him without making any threats, both of my hands on my camera, with all kinds of witnesses on my camera and everything else. Because my hotel is on the other side. There's no way to cross the street there. We were going back. Then he started engaging me. He was yelling at me again. He was talking about Eric Brandt. He was, you know what I mean? We were having a conversation, heated or not, and he didn't seem to feel threatened, right? It wasn't the kind of behavior that you would see from someone who feels threatened. He felt agitated. He was mad that someone was calling him a pedophile in public and that they were investigating his place where he lives, because that's none of my business. And that's what I got out of the situation, right? And so I kept my space from him. I never once threatened him. I never once invaded his space. I never walked up more than 10 or 15 feet from him. And I never, in that instance, used any kind of even real questionable language. You know, I mean, cuss words maybe, but I don't see that as real questionable. He did smoke marijuana in the car. I filmed that while he was driving around, which is what elongated the contact between him and I, right? I was talking to the manager. They were going to get him out of there and trespass him, and it was over. But then he started smoking weed in the car, and the police got involved. And so it elongated pretty much me filming him. And again, I never once threatened him. I never, and there were witnesses everywhere. And no one felt like I was threatening him. No one felt, acted like he was, going to be hurt or anything else. And for the most part, people were laughing. Moving forward to the second incident, I have text
Hang on, Mr.
messages.
Archibald.
Okay.
I'm going to pause you right before the second incident. I apologize to both of you. I need to take just a very quick recess.
I would love it if I could have 5 minutes myself in order to get a drink of water.
Yeah, and I need to, just so you both know, I need to use the restroom because I want to be able to fully concentrate on both your testimony. So, Mr. Archibald, you all right if we take a 5-minute break?
Whatever you need, sir.
I apologize, and then we'll start back up. All right. And you can step outside and grab it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
This better? I had my mic flipped up. Yeah, it's been such a long time since I'd done WebEx and trying to maneuver around it and kept on stacking in our stage. And I'm like, huh? Yep.
Stop fucking with it. I was like, who's talking?
Do you think that he's going to grant it just by off the evidence?
Were you talking to me?
Anybody?
I do not have the answer to your question, sir.
All right, we just need to wait for my clerk, and then we can start back. Quick. Start that back up. All right, we're back on the record. Mr. Fredrickson is back in the courtroom. Mr. Archibald, are you still with us?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Archibald, I'm going to start your timer, and you may resume.
Okay. We are at the second incident. Okay, so I have text messages from my wife that I'd be more than happy to show the court. Um, both for the second and the third incident that would prove for my wife that I was being sent for my family over to the store previous to even knowing that Rex was even where he was. I didn't know he was at King Supers the second time, and I didn't know he was at King Supers the third time until I was already on my way there or there. Um, So wife sends me to King Supers for some Lunchables for the kids and a couple of other things. Um, I'm walking over to King Supers and I start getting phone calls from either subscribers or other people that are talking about how Rex is threatening me and talking about how if he had the chance, he would take my firearm from me the next time that he saw me. Um, and then what got me to start looking at what he was doing was the phone call talking about how he had made a video underneath a bridge with his dog, and he said that he had brought a knife down there, and if I wanted to meet him down there, that we could just hash it out or something along those lines.
Sorry, let me get some clarification. Did that happen after the first incident or before? So in between these incidents?
In between the two incidents, okay?
All right.
So in the same video, just previous to me leaving my house, apparently, I hadn't seen it. It just had what got me like the notification. Someone had called me and said, "Hey, by the way, he said this." And so I didn't even know that it had actually happened. It was just people telling me, "Hey, go look at his channel." So when I showed up to his channel, he was already in the car and he was driving somewhere. I didn't know where he was. It was none of my business. And
Your Honor,
then as
can I
he's
have
driving,
clarification? Is this the beginning of the
Nope.
second video that he's referring to?
You can ask that at the end of his testimony.
Okay.
thank you. So he's driving when I get into the stream and he's talking about me. And he's talking about what happened. He's talking about how, I don't have control of my firearm and I'm the threat to the public. And, oh crap, really quick. The only other thing I forgot about the first incident is he did walk away with criminal charges. After the first incident. And then the lieutenant or the sergeant actually made it a non-criminal trespass after the fact, which I respect. But in the moment, they actually did file charges on him for the way he was acting and being. Okay, so back to the second incident. So I'm walking, he's driving. I didn't even know that he had seen me at this point, which I have video from his stream where he sees me and says that he should stop the car, put it in reverse, come and film me and chase me around a parking lot. And that isn't something that somebody says who is afraid and who needs to go and grab a restraining order. But I didn't even know that it happened at this point, right? And I don't care that he's challenging me because I don't want to fight him. I've been using in his content because I feel like he is, a public figure.
Gonna need you to silence that.
Sorry.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Archibald. So
Okay,
you were talking about, can you just back up a second? I think you said you didn't want to fight him. You wanted to use him as content.
Yes, sir. So I have never wanted a physical altercation with Rex, and I have always kept my space from him, given him his space, and just kind of repeated things that he said. And so you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know any of this stuff, and I don't really care that he's been challenging me. I just think that it speaks to, his mindset. So we get with me on the way to the store, and then I hear, as I would assume he's pulling into the parking lot at King Supers, he says, "Okay, kiddo, I don't think this is going to work today." And he said it a couple of times. And so that's what got me to start paying more attention to him. Then he started talking to and about me, looking into the camera while he's walking around King Supers. So that's what got me to go look for him. And so he had been talking about how he's going to beat me up and how, I don't have any control of my firearm. And whatever. And so after hearing him say the thing about the kiddo, knowing that I had gotten involved with him because of the registration at the wrong address concern, and then him talking about me and him being a public figure, I just went and found him in the store, turned on my camera, and started repeating things that he was saying to and about me. As long as we were having a conversation and he was still responding to me, I was on some, we're still talking. It might not be the most friendly of conversations, but he's still talking to me. He was still walking up to me. You know what I mean? There are people that, okay, so Rex's roommate works at King Supers. After all this happened, they both started trolling my wife's Facebook and stuff. So that doesn't really matter right now. But the point is that when he saw me, he said, "You have a camera and a firearm. Get away from me." Okay. And that's exactly what I did. I have it on video, right? Because, it was Rex's roommate. And so, but my point was that the way that a person acts when they're actually afraid is, "You have a camera and a firearm. Get away from me. I don't want to talk to you." And that's exactly what I did. So, but Rex wanted to talk to me. Rex was, wanting to talk about how I like drama, and he wanted to talk about all kinds of other stuff in the video and whatever. So that's what we were doing. Eventually, I get tired of hearing, and this is a personal default and problem that I'm working on, but eventually I got tired of hearing things that Rex was saying because it was just crazy. Um, like, this man has a gun and he's following me around. He must be doing meth, right? And so I was like, okay, this guy is a pedophile. You know what I mean? And so he keeps on telling people that I put my hand on my firearm, but that's impossible if I'm using my right hand to point at him and basically touch his head in the camera, right? Like, I'm still 20 feet away, but my finger looks like I'm touching his head, and it's good for comedy. So that doesn't work, saying that I touched my gun. And again, King Supers, instead of calling the police on me or having a problem, was on some like, "Okay, take that shit outside, guys." Or take that stuff outside. I didn't mean to say that, Your Honor. So we make our way outside. He's still, talking to me, and he actually calls the police himself, tells the police that I pulled my firearm out and that I've been touching it and that I was running around making threats and all this other stuff. I've done it on camera. He filmed me. So the police run code out to that King Supers on North College. And there was like 10 total police officers, 8 or 9 cars. It was a pretty big response. They pointed guns at me. They took my firearm. They unloaded my firearm all the way down to the magazine empty, Your Honor. And then they held me, and like, I was detained until they had assessed the situation. And they assessed the situation, and they said no laws have been broken. They said that I, probably shouldn't be messing with Rex anymore. But ultimately, they haven't seen any proof that I had made any threats. They had, no one else saw that I had pulled my firearm like Rex was claiming. And he said that I had done it in the middle of the store in the parking lot. So there should have been a bunch of witnesses. So they put my firearm and the ammunition in a bag, like a jail bag almost, separate, in 2 separate bags. The ammunition was in a smaller bag. The firearm itself was in a bigger bag, and the small bag was inside the big bag. So while I'm walking back to my hotel room, which is 2 blocks away, I'm open carrying a bag of firearm. Your Honor, he says that I was brandishing a firearm, but that was how I was required to carry it. And for comedy's sake, filming yourself after doing what I do, and I mean, I can understand where people would think that I get into some childish things and shouldn't be involved in whatever I am, but this is what I've chosen to do. And for at least laughing sake and comedy, holding up a firearm in a bag and calling it Bag O Firearm is hilarious. It's not brandishing a firearm, in my opinion. And that's the way that the cops made me take it back. I was just technically showing that and making jokes about it. I get back to my hotel room. I'm in private, still filming myself. I'm away from any windows or anything like that. And I reloaded my firearm. I showed the camera what was in my firearm, like the type of bullets, which is where he gets these rest in peace rounds. And then I put it up. And I thanked everybody for showing up to the stream, and that was it. So in between that video and the gas station video, Rex made 12-hour, 15-hour streams on me, talking about these streams and what I did wrong and how he's going to get you to take away my firearm, how he's going to red flag law me, how he could take my firearm from me in public if he so chooses. And Your Honor, there's days and days and days of this man with my name in his mouth, um, just on some, I'm gonna get you, I can do all kinds of stuff to you, you're going to court. And this is before we showed up in court the last time. So he had been like threatening me with a lawsuit in court. He says I'm going to get a federal lawsuit. He sent me an email before court that day, talking about if I don't show up, he's going to go into court and tell you anything that he wants, and you're going to take it into record, and it's going to be what seals my fate with the felony charges for felony menacing and all this other stuff that he's going to file on me. And he figured out how he can go around the police and just serve me with felony charges and get a warrant for my arrest without having to deal with the police. He's just going to serve paperwork to the district attorney's office, and they're going to handle it for him. And so, I mean, whatever, right? And so my wife and I are on some like, okay, you need cigarettes and we need some pop and milk for the baby. You should go to the gas station. And this is the third incident. So I still hadn't been served. He's still talking about how he's going to serve me court paperwork to come to your court the next day. And so I'm walking over to the gas station, didn't know he was there, didn't know he was live, didn't know, hadn't been paying any attention because I don't care. And so I'm walking across the street. I look up while I'm, listening to my music, and I see Rex's truck in the at the pump, or Rex's van. I apologize. And I'm like, okay. So I start up my camera because I'm gonna go in there anyways. I don't care. And I mean, he said he had paperwork for me. I had never threatened him to this point. You know what I mean? I was more than willing to go to court with him. Like I said, that was my plan. Rex has been on the internet this entire time. He says things like, the 14-year-old that I fucked looked like a whore, and that it was her fault that I did that to her. And so there's a lot of comments like that. I mean, he talking to 14-year-olds and minors about their titties on Fortnite. And that's all stuff that, you know what I mean? It's just gross, nasty stuff that he does in public. And then he's surprised when people start commenting on it. And I was more than happy to meet him in court. And so I'm like, okay, here we go. Going in the gas station. I filmed Tommy outside because Tommy said he was afraid of me. I didn't even engage Tommy. I filmed the car. I realized Tommy was in the car. I made note of it to the camera because it's funny, because Rex tried to say that Tommy wasn't the same guy that worked at King Soopers, and I bothered someone random. So I was making a joke about that. And then I went into the store and I made an effort to go to the right-hand side so the exit was unblocked. I put my right hand up in the camera, put my finger on it like I was touching his head, like I was telling you, just for comedy's sake. And I said, that man's a pedophile. And then I backed up some more. At that point, Rex put his hand over his head and bum rushes me while yelling at me and spitting on me. So in that stream, I took the hand that was holding my camera and I punched Rex square in the solar plexus. He did not get anywhere near me. They checked the cameras. That's what I told the police. I said, he came up to me. I said, the way that he was acting made me think maybe I didn't think this all the way through and he doesn't have the mental status to deal with this. But that does not mean at that point, I'd already gotten myself in the situation. I wasn't actually trying to do anything. And, so I punched him in the solar plexus or the right below whatever. And he takes a big, deep breath. And I put my hand on the back of my firearm, like resting my hand to make sure it stays in the holster because of all these comments that he's made about trying to take it. So as soon as he backs up, because I had hit him, he thought he had won. It was like a bait to get me to hit him. And so he says, "Oh, he pulled his firearm and he hit me. Call the police." And so the gas station calls the police for him and makes the report that I pulled a firearm on it. And so and directly right after that, the manager says, "Get the hell out of here." And so I know better than to argue with anybody. And because I was carrying my firearm and everything had just blown up in my face, I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm leaving right now." I turned around and walked out. I didn't complain about anything, walked out the door. At that point, the manager that had told me to leave said that she followed me out and then she started yelling at me and she's saying other stuff about how I followed Rex into the gas station and, I'm the one that made the drama. And I mean, that comment's partially true. But I did not follow Rex into the gas station. I didn't even know he was there before I got there. And I actually told her that. And then I told her I have money for cigarettes and milk for my baby. I'm not, I didn't know, you know what I mean? She wasn't trying to hear it. And I said, "Okay, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just going to leave." And so I left. I walked across the street. I got back to my hotel before the police even made contact with me. I took off my headphones. I gave my headphones to my wife at the door, turned around, put my hands up. The police recognized me from the other incident with Rex. And so the officer said, "Do not touch yours. I won't touch mine." And I said, "Okay." I put my hands on my head. They took my firearm off my waist. And they went about their business. They put me in the back of their car and started investigating. I showed them the video while I was in the back of the car. I said, "Look, sir," I said, "I went in there. I'm kind of a dumbass. And I mean, I respect your court, but that's exactly what I said to these officers. I said, I didn't, consider his mental health versus, he's been saying all this stuff. He's a public figure. I'm going to go film this guy real quick," is like the thought process. It's YouTube, right? I'm out in public. And as long as I don't actually threaten anybody, and I haven't heard him or seen him. And if it's only the videos that we're talking about, there's no proof that I've ever threatened him physically or otherwise. I did make a comment about like following him around for like YouTube's sake, but that's all for entertainment. And if you look at it, since this order was issued and even previous to that, I pretty much had no contact with him. I don't follow him around. I don't go and figure out where he is daily and give him hell. And especially since this order, there's been no content on my channel about him. There's been no comments. I haven't been talking to other people about him. I have been receiving a bunch of information and new stuff that he's said and done. But I still don't even, you know what I mean? I say, "Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good day." I'm not getting involved. So from there, we've got a couple of different things that have kind of happened. The daily streams about me have continued. He's got the restraining order on me, and so he originally wanted me to, like he said publicly, that I had better take down all my videos that have his name on them, or he was going to file a restraining order violation. I don't know what happened with that, but I haven't gotten arrested. Also was released off of my probation. So you know what I mean? I've been on supervised, I've been supervised. So I don't necessarily see again where like the threats or this other stuff even, you know what I mean? Like if I was on probation carrying firearms, there's like almost a triple line of, um, looking at what I do in my actions. Let me see. I had this list, so I'm sorry. So I didn't see any challenges to like a real fight or anything like that. I commented on stuff that he was saying in his video. I didn't walk up to him and actually want to fight with him. I didn't express that. My body language didn't express that. No one else saw anything like that. So I'm not completely sure where that came from. Um, ASMR, the guy that he's talking about, is only involved because I dragged him into it on a video. The people that have been paying me only want me to succeed and do well. And they like the idea of me going from police to doing something else. And they're completely uninvolved. They are subscribers, but they're family members.
Can you actually, let me pause you. Can you give me a
Okay.
better sense? I mean, I think I'm getting the idea, and you're describing yourself as a YouTube content creator. Is that, would you consider that a job?
Yes, sir.
Can you just give me a little bit more background?
So I'm turning it into a job. Basically, I started an LLC called 303 CopBlock about 6 years ago. And the idea of that 6 years ago was I could try to do some good with police interaction because I wasn't going to be allowed to be a police officer myself, and my mom was a police officer. And that's because of like drug addiction stuff in the past. I've got like a meth problem from when I was 13. And so because I did that, they won't allow officers that have a previous meth problem. It's my understanding. So I start this YouTube channel and it turns into like I'm playing around in like the cop hate pool. And I became pretty popular there because I know what's going on. Like I said, I was going to be a cop. My mom was a cop. And so basically, like my family has watched me do this and become successful there, but it also caused a lot of problems for my wife, my kids, and myself that you can imagine. I've had extra charges, I've had extra jail time, and it's a bunch of stuff that if I wouldn't have gone and gotten myself into, my wife and my kids wouldn't have been subject to that. That's my fault. And so after getting sober, I started talking to family after a couple of years about, I would like to do YouTube full time, and I was getting sick. And so basically, through getting sick, doctor told me not to be doing any of the construction work. And so the family said, well, what else do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to do YouTube. I think that this would be a great, opportunity. And my wife was actually like, you should do YouTube. You know what I mean? Let's find something else for you to do and we'll figure it out. And instead of having to figure it out, because of the changes that we had started talking about making and what she was telling specifically her family, because my family is non-existent. Her family is the ones that went and invested in me. They were like, oh, okay, so if you're going to chase down pedophiles, and I mean, that's pretty much what we're calling it, and whatever, but that's not exactly what's going on. But we support that way more than messing with the police. And so I was getting donations and just money sent to me just to get this stuff off the ground. And just to be able to survive. At this point, we're staying in a hotel in Fort Collins with 6 kids because the apartment that I paid rent on had mice in it that we found, and they weren't going to clean it up. I kept on having to vacuum stuff up and kill mice. More would appear and other stuff. And so I documented all that, and I could show it to you, but it has nothing to do with this case. So it doesn't.
No, yeah, you don't need to go into that.
Yeah. So, but that's how this all got started, right? Like I got sick off of this mice and stuff. Doctors told me to stop working. People started sending me money to be able to focus on YouTube. I made the decision after viewing Rex's video about his address myself to go film that address and see what happened. All I was doing was shaking the tree down.
You also referenced Mr. Fredrickson being a public figure at least once, if not twice. Explain that to me. How's Mr. Fredrickson?
Rex, by my description of a public figure, he is a YouTube content creator as well. If he decides he doesn't want to call himself that, that's fine. But every single video that I have of him ratting himself out is from his YouTube channels. He might not be making money, but he's content creating. So that is in public. He talks about all this stuff in public. he posts it for everybody's consumption. That to me means it's all public, makes him a public figure. Moving forward from there, he also does this WDRN news thing on the radio. The fact of that matter is that he is a public figure there. He has all this other stuff going on, and that radio station has ran out of a garage, which is hilarious for comedy.
All right. I have a couple other questions for you, but what I'd like to do, you're at 30 minutes now. Let me see if Mr. Fredrickson has questions that he would like me to ask you. Mr. Fredrickson, questions for Mr. Archibald?
I have a plethora of them, but I think that he's already answered most of them. First of all, he said that he's not addicted, and yet he have recently got off of meth. When was the last time he took meth?
I'm not going to ask that. That's not relevant.
I believe that it would be, Your Honor, because unfortunately, people that have done meth, and the same reason why they're not employable is because they're subject to sudden, irrational decision-making. And this is a...
Still not going to ask the question. Do you have another question?
Okay. What knife are you talking about? He referred to in the second video that I was below a... No, I retract that. It's not there, so what's the point? What is the address? 603 Willix.
And what was the relevance of that question?
He said that he was not using the civil and that it was public. Of course it is public. But the civil lawsuit mentions 603 Willix as a witness. During the video of the first video, it can be clearly shown the fact that he has submitted 3 times, maybe 4, different reports in hopes to get me arrested. He mentions in the very first few minutes of the first video that he's there due to a civil.
Okay, so this seems like it's rebuttal argument, not a question.
It is. I'm sorry.
Question.
You're
going to get a chance.
The problem I have is substance for the question because it's been
But that means
no questions.
That means you want to
Easier
argue.
to summarize.
Yeah. Mr. Archibald, I have some
Already
questions for you.
Testified to these.
Mr.
What
Archibald,
can I do for you?
well, I'm trying to get a better picture of the two of you. So it appears to me, and Mr. Fredrickson, I want you to answer this question when it's your turn as well. There appears to be some sort of bad blood between the two of you before the first video.
So the only other bad blood that we have is the 2 times that Rex has showed up while I was filming somewhere else with other people. The first time was downtown Denver a few years ago. There was a SWAT event down there where they almost accidentally burnt down the house that we were filming. Rex jumped on my stream, said, "Hey, I want to come down and film with you." And I said, "Okay." Moments later, someone notified me that he is a pedophile. And so in the moment, Rex had come down to hang out with me. By the time that he found me, I knew who and what he was, to my opinion. And he did not appreciate the reaction that he got after he got to me, especially after football time when he would see me. And I wasn't nice about it. You know what I mean? You fucked up. You're a pedophile. Kids are sacred. Who do you think you are? Get the fuck away from me. Those are things that I said to him. You know what I mean? It wasn't nice. And then I left the area because I didn't want to be around him. Moving forward, this whole Eric Brandt name that he keeps dragging up into everything. I brought Eric out to Fort Collins with a buddy of mine while we were protesting CSU police because they had arrested us and we were unhappy about it. That doesn't matter, but that's how I'll describe it for your sake. So we're down filming all that. We get arrested. We bring Eric down because Eric was like, next level protester, whatever. We were
Your
just.
Honor, I do have a question I'd like to ask. Is it
Well, let
possible
him-
I may?
No,
a
it's
simple
not.
one.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
no, if you have an objection,
sorry,
you
go
can
ahead.
interrupt, but you interrupted.
I apologize.
You can ask your question after Mr. Archibald is done. All right, Mr. Archibald.
So, okay, thanks. So I bring Eric down with my other buddy Bird, which is the guy that filmed the King Supers incident. Uh, so and we're out doing stuff, and they're protesting and whatever. My buddy gets into a verbal argument with somebody else, and the cops are called, and the whole situation goes out of control. Rex shows up, and I again was on some like, we don't hang out with pedophiles, we're out of here. Rex is mad at me because it is my opinion that this guy Eric chose a pedophile over me. And I'm not really hurt about it, but that means I don't want to talk to either of them. And that's the way that I've been, right? Like, and so basically what I'm doing is this is all for entertainment. I'm not personally involved. Sometimes my personal morals get involved. But this is only an entertainment channel and a little bit of like a success story, right? I was a foster kid. Everybody used to say that I was being raised to go to prison or die. Still haven't done that, so technically I'm winning. And so, you know what I mean? I haven't learned everything. Obviously, I'm in a hotel right now, but it's a success story, right? I started off real bad. Started off with being a super argumentative, drunk person, and my active, content creating is giving me the ability to look at myself and see what I want to change about myself, which is different, I think, than other people's stuff. I'm pretty self-centered in that way. But that's how I've become this calmer, you know what I mean? I was able to listen to Rex say all those things about me that either never happened or just extrapolated out of, thin air, and it didn't make me angry. I'm not worked up, and this is me on a daily basis, right? I don't get involved. I don't really care. But for comedy, I'm willing to go film stuff right up until the point where it would probably be illegal.
So let me pause you there, Mr. Fredrickson. What was the and again, wait till he asks the questions, and I'll let you know if it's one that you should answer. But what's the question you wanted to answer?
Without court intervention, does he continue to perform? Does he intend to continue to perform whatever it is that he's performing with my interaction?
Mr. Archibald, I will have you answer that question. I was going to ask something similar.
So Mr. Fredrickson is aware that it has been my plan to leave the state for over a month now. He's actually been making comments about how TROs are valid in all 50 states. Essentially, like he was trying to get a TRO on me, even though he knows
Your
I
Honor,
was
was it a
leaving.
yes or no question?
I'm leaving. How would I? Your Honor, I'm leaving. There's no way for me
It's
to
still a
even
yes or no
physically be
question.
able
He
to.
could-
Hang on,
No.
stop arguing.
Yes,
Both
Your
of you.
Honor.
Mr. Archibald,
I'm
you
sorry,
too. Hang on.
Sorry.
So is by saying you're leaving the state, does that mean, is your answer no to the question?
No, I would not. I would not be pursuing Mr. Fredrickson anymore.
Okay.
Like the whole point was to get a video out of him as like a lol cow, and that's just a term that we use for someone that you can milk for content. And I was going to be done with him, but because he's so local to me and so offended that I would be in public calling him a pedophile, it turned into something completely different. And I didn't think about that. That's my mistake. But as I told the police, I didn't think about all this other stuff. I didn't like his mental status. I think would be, you know what I mean? I was just on some, you're a public figure, you're doing this stuff in public, and I could talk about it because it's all public. So I did. I didn't consider that he would take it so personally. I didn't consider that after, trying to fight me, that he would go and figure or, get a temporary restraining order on me. You know what I mean? I figured that this is all just YouTube stuff, and I wouldn't have bothered the police or the court with it.
All right,
I know for that.
I think you answered the question.
Thank you.
Other questions, Mr. Fredrickson?
Your Honor, I think that answers whatever relevance I can do. There's just simply too many things wrong here. If I ask a question, the only thing I'm doing is asking whether or not Santa Claus wears a red coat. We're already in fantasy. I can't answer questions there.
I have no idea what you meant by that, but all right. Do you want to present your rebuttal?
I would like to, yes.
Go ahead.
The beginning of the first video, he says that he is there due to a civil complaint. He continues to read with Asmar in the video the contents of that civil complaint, driving information directly from it. He claims to have access to public record, but fails to find out that I have a driver's license while he pursued me and attempted to falsely get me arrested for not having a driver's license. He then doubles down again, saying that I should be arrested for a different reason. And then he mentions himself that the address that I used was a mailing address. Now, it depends on the application of the mailing address that is being used, whether it's personal or business, and whether other people, and whether the convenience of making sure that it arrives and stays put and not blown out of something or snow thing or whatever the story may be that may interfere with it 12 miles out in country to be delivered, and I don't check the mail out there. So to have it delivered to one of the business addresses that I'm working with, that I am registered as a contractor and working, knowing that all of the compliance in my registration is, then he wants to claim that it's a registration violation that we're bothering him, trying to legitimize nothing more than entertainment at my expense, at my intimidation.
I mean, he essentially testified to that, right?
Yes, sir. And then he goes
hang
on
let me-
to intimidating acts to milk the content. He's committing intimidating acts in order to milk the content. Am I not supposed to be intimidated? He goes on in order to mix two metaphors, two qualities of being a man. One is cowardice, the other is courage. One is actually three. One is cowardice, one is courage, and the other is fear. These things can coexist at the same time. Ask anybody that actually has been in combat. Were they afraid? I think that my behavior was controlled. And I do believe that he is pointing out that if I had chosen to, I could have broken the law. If I had chosen to, I could have taken things into my own hands. If I had chosen to, is a choice I keep. That way I remain the chooser of the next choice. If I react instead of respond, I lose choices. My reaction, my response has
Let me
been
pause
to
you for
take
a
him
second.
properly to court. He has
Mr.
perjured
Frederickson,
himself.
hang on one second. You're losing me a little bit with that last argument. What's
The
the
argument
point
is,
you're
Your
trying to
Honor,
make?
if I respond emotionally or react without thinking, without any forethought, I lose control. If I lose control of the situation, specifically myself, I have lost any other choice that I have after that because someone else is going to stop me making those choices. A police officer is going to say, no, you cannot rob a bank because you have an electric bill.
How is this relevant to
The reason being
how is
is
this
because
rebuttable?
he is converting what I am clearly saying is my choice to respond to his intimidation, threats, and menacing acts, okay, as a threat. It is not. It is my choice. And I was pointing out that I had a choice. I could have pounded the heck out of you. I could have went military. I could have got real life on you. Whatever those terms actually
That's
mean.
2 times that he just addressed me directly, Your Honor.
However, I am saying that
And
I'm saying
didn't-
that I keep the choice.
address the court. Let me just say
I
that.
that's what I'm saying.
Don't address
I,
Mr.
I,
Archibald.
I am keeping the choice by making a response, a proper one, something that is well thought, not showing up with someone's house. He also referred to the fact of leaving town. He didn't tell you why. The video that he is announcing leaving town, he is announcing that he would like to go to this other gentleman's house and do the same thing that he did to me in another state in a banana suit, a bullhorn, and a gun.
It's a banana
Literally,
hammock.
I made a response to that was titled banana suit, bullhorn, and a gun. These things don't belong together. This is Sesame Street stuff. These things don't belong together. But he is going to go to another state to intimidate, and I don't have his name offhand because, like I said, I haven't really been
think
paying
it's
attention to
relevant.
the shows. But there's other problems here, Your Honor. He says that 3 times I passed him on the way to the store. in saying that he wasn't following me or going to the store. But he says I passed him 3 times in a straight line from one point to the other. Was I driving circles around the motel that he lives in? That's also not possible. It's one entrance. So he's saying that I had a knife under the bridge in my video, which was the overlap video of his. Did that show me under a bridge? You said that you watched the entire thing. These are obviously perjurous attempts with the court. Now, the court sanction on that, I'm going to leave it up to you. But the two things that I think that I have,
I can't.
Again, I don't know what the sanction would be, but this is quite obvious. In his own testimony, he says this is absolute contrary to the video. I suggest that this makes up his excuses to reinforce and replicate this behavior based on these excuses and lies. And I also suggest that would encourage other people in order to do this too. This is a dangerous situation. Again, I state clearly that challenge in the grocery store for a fight, you want to go at it? You want to go at it now with a gun on? If I had chosen to react, the contest would not have been between me and him. The contest would have been for the control of that gun, and that gun could have went off being a semi-automatic and an unknown condition to me. I believed, and this is something else I'm personally upset with him about, because he broke the standards in which a Second Amendment audit is conducted. And this is an agreed standard for anybody that is experienced. You do not wear a gun that is loaded or locked. You don't even have ammunition on me. Why? Because the only way that it'd be considered anything that would be searched if it was a public threat. The only thing that's going to determine that is my behavior while armed. I think I've demonstrated that well. But the second thing of it is, the reason why is because when you are searched unlawfully, that is absolute defined, you were not a threat carrying that weapon. This is a standard operating practice, even though there's nothing, it's an unspoken thing. But that is actually the claim of a Second Amendment activity.
While we're on the Second Amendment, I mean, you're essentially asking me here today I agree with you. The Second Amendment comes with great responsibility, right?
I myself have been tired to it. I am a felon, Your Honor, and yet I cannot function with a commercially available weapon, but I can make any ID I want. But I swear.
No, you're not letting me finish my question.
I am sorry. I'm sorry.
I recognize you're upset, but I'm having a hard time.
I am too, Your Honor. There's too much false information here from his testimony.
Well, then just answer my question.
Yes, sir.
So I can, because I'm the one that needs to figure out what to do here. Let me back up. Mr. Archibald testified that essentially, and this is what I'm taking away from watching the video and listening to you and listening to Mr. Archibald, he's creating content here. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Under the premise of an investigative report, which is governed
whatever it may be, he's creating
governed by federal and state law in its conductance. Yes.
So his intent here is to create content. He's confronting you. He's aggravating you. He's challenging you.
Would that be inclusive?
To create content. That's the point I'm trying to get at.
While armed. I think that ends the case, Your Honor.
I disagree with you. I'm trying to get to the bottom of it, but I'm having a hard time.
Your Honor, the fact is there is no reason for him to have contact with me. There's no business. There's no family relationship. The existence of the TRO in that aspect is going to carry out what he claims to intend. And what I claim intend to do is not to have contact. There is no harm in the action of the TRO itself. The only thing remaining would be the existence or non-existence of a permanent or temporary restriction upon his Second Amendment right while on probation, which would trigger the probation department or you to determine that. But I don't know which, actually. I don't know how this will be looked at.
You're asking me I agree with the first statement you made at the beginning, that there's no reason for the two of you to have contact. That is clear. But what you're asking me to do by asking for a permanent protection order is you want me to permanently restrict Mr. Archibald's freedom of movement. You want me to permanently deprive him of his Second Amendment rights. and potentially implicate his First Amendment rights. That's what you're asking me to
Okay,
do.
I
Is it
can
not?
make this simpler. I can make this simpler. The fact that he does intend in order to leave, the fact that to this time, he has been complacent and compliant with the temporary TRO. I withdraw the request for the Second Amendment consideration.
You're still
And
asking for the restriction of.
I still ask for the restriction of no contact, and I ask that that be properly recorded in public record in the future for the future use.
All right. Let me make some findings. So first of all, the court finds it has subject matter and personal jurisdiction. So I heard testimony from Mr. Frederickson. I heard testimony from Mr. Archibald. I also viewed 2 videos that were submitted to me. Based on that, I find that Mr. Archibald is a YouTube content creator. It appears Mr. Frederickson is some kind of content creator as well. I'm unclear as to the nature of that because I didn't receive a lot of testimony as to it. The video that was provided to me makes it clear to me that Mr. Archibald he's live streaming this. He's creating content. Arguably, he's creating comedic content. I think reasonable minds can differ as to what is comedy, and this might not be the content I would consume, but I don't know that it rises to anything more than that.
May I have clarification?
I'm not done
in
yet.
The fact
I
that
might clarify here in a minute.
Mr.
Mr. Frederickson, you need to stop interrupting me. You've been interrupting Mr. Archibald. You just need to wait for a moment.
Apologize, Your Honor. Forgive me.
What I'm uneasy about in this case is, Mr. Frederickson, you're asking me to restrict, that's why was asking about earlier. You're asking me to restrict Mr. Archibald's freedom of movement. You're asking me to deprive him. You've now withdrawn a request, but I've heard this whole testimony with your request to deprive him of his Second Amendment rights. Based on what I've heard, that you're both creating content, I think there are some First Amendment implications as well. And what I see here is 2 content creators who, like I said earlier, there's some bad blood based on the content you've created. That gives me pause. And Mr. Archibald, I will say, I don't know that I'm supportive of some of the things you were doing in this video. I certainly wouldn't encourage you to continue to confront or antagonize people the way you did Mr. Frederickson. I think you certainly may have placed the public in fear when you're walking around pointing at him, yelling pedophile. However, me disagreeing with that is a far cry from me making a legal ruling that placed Mr. Frederickson or the public in imminent danger. But I don't know that I even need to make that determination because I find Mr. Archibald's statement that he's leaving the state credible. He clearly answered your question that he's done filming you or done confronting you. And if I find that statement credible, then I can't find that you've established a second element that you need to establish. So I'm primarily basing my ruling here today on that you've not established the second element because Mr. Archibald credibly testified that he would no longer contact you, that he would no longer film you, and that he's leaving the state. Now, Mr. Archibald, I will simply say this. I have no reason to doubt your statement. I am denying the request for a permanent protection order. This case will close today. However, if you engage in this kind of behavior again towards Mr. Frederickson, Mr. Frederickson can file this motion again, and I certainly would consider that an aggravating circumstance that you came into court under oath, said you wouldn't do this again, and then do it again. Having given that warning, I have no reason to believe you would do that, but I wanted that on the record.
Okay.
So based on that, as I said, I'm denying your request, Mr. Frederickson. Do you have any questions about my ruling? And before you ask, you have the right to appeal my decision. You don't have the right to argue about my decision, and you have the right to appeal within 21 days.
You asked me if I had a question, though.
Yes.
Would that include the nature of your decision? Example of, I get a case, normally they have a description of how they arrived at that description. Can I ask a specific question within that?
May.
How is it that stating clearly that he will punk me out wherever he goes, that we do not have a departure date for Mr. Archibald, whether that is a week from now or a month from now or next year. The other problem that I have is,
So you can ask me a question, but
well,
you're
that's the
not doing-
question. That is the question is how does the statements within the surveillance footage, not the content, because the content was for entertainment purposes only, does not fall into the category that from point A, which is today, to point B, that he leaves this area. And I don't know if there is an adjustment that you can make or a stipulation, because I do not want him to show up at my house today, which is possible. He's enthusiastic. He will go with the guidelines of this court very, very quickly and
Well, here-
perhaps exceed that.
I will simply repeat this. I understood his testimony, and I stand by this to say that he will no longer contact you. He will no longer film you. If he does, I'm the magistrate who reviews applications for protection orders. If he comes to your house this afternoon, completely contradicting what he just told me, then you file another motion. And again, I would find that aggravating circumstance, because that means that his statement was not credible. Right now, I'm finding his statement credible. And if I find the statement credible, I understand you disagree with me. I recognize that.
I still don't know where the knife was in the videos, Your Honor, that he testified to, that I was sharpening underneath a bridge with my dog.
Okay, Mr. Frederickson, we're done.
I understand.
All right.
There
Mr. Archibald,
is a administrative question for the court that is,
hang on. Mr. Archibald, do you have any questions for me?
No, Your Honor. Thank you for hearing this mess of a case, and have a good day, sir.
Thank you. And hang tight one moment. You had an administrative question?
it would not involve him.
Then I can't answer it.
It does.
I'm not
All right.
engaged in
The
pro
administrative question is dealing with the clerk. I have to report to the clerk or to the court. And I was going to make a administrative judicial inquiry concerning some rules in the court and in the clerk's office. It's very specific only because it was raised in this case, in the filing of this case. I am basically obstructed from filing a felony complaint, which is a legal impossibility.
You cannot file a felony
But
complaint.
that is a legal impossibility according to the Constitution. I have.
Well, I'm not going to engage with you. That's outside.
Thank you.
All right,
Your
Mr.
Honor. I'm
Archibald,
sorry.
at this time, I'm going to let you go.
Thank
Hearing
you,
is
Your Honor. I
concluded.
appreciate you letting him
Again,
know that.
I
He's
told
been
you,
trying anyway.
didn't
Thank you,
directly
sir.
involve him.
And in that case, I can't have a discussion with you. I can't give you legal advice.